anytime the economy gets tougher, it seems like there's more and more issues. And I think it comes from a few different ways. Number one, nobody wants to take responsibility when something goes bad, right? A consumer or an agent.
The owners just don't want to have to deal with any of that and skirt by it. And so that's when I think a listing agent gets themselves in a lot of trouble, is they start making all these decisions that isn't theirs to make.
You've got a business, you've set it up, you've worked hard to get clients. Make sure that the service is there and the people are there to take care of them. But if you're doing anything for free, stop it. Yeah, I don't care how much business that client's given you. I don't care how much they promise you. I don't care any excuse you come up with.
Welcome to Signature Buzz, your fast-paced weekly real estate sales meeting.
All right, welcome to the Signature Buzz. Been a little bit, Chris, since I've been on the show with you. I thank you for holding down the fort. I think you've been doing a good job. I had minimal complaints, but lots of letters saying that they missed me. So here I am.
Yeah, the introduction wasn't the same without you. When I go Buzz, nobody gets it when you're not there to laugh at it.
As you can see, I changed up the introduction this time, so maybe I'm a little out of practice. But the episodes, the last two episodes that you did, thanks for stepping in and doing those without me. Had some of the highest ratings, just so you know. Best shows ever. But no, they were great. I
kept watching it over and over.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
From different computers, different IP addresses? Yeah, that's good. But they were good. I mean, I really enjoyed the one with Shelly Panzarella with Prosperity Lending. We've known her a long time. She's been a great strategic partner with being our loan partner. But I learned a lot of stuff about her.
I did too. Every time I do one of these, you think you know someone really well until you actually sit down and go through 20 questions. And that's what I did. I put Shelly through 20 questions. And I just literally completed a real estate transaction with her the week before we recorded the meeting. And it was so enlightening. Again, just her history, the way she got into the business, the way she's kind of built her lending empire. And I say it that way because she really has an incredible infrastructure. She's built and surrounded herself by a great team. But she's one of those people that has the ability to build relationships better than almost anyone I've ever seen. I mean, it's evident because she does it with us. She does it with our agents. She does it with people that we know in the industry. And it really brought me back to the mindset of, I've got to show my clients I care. And I got a phone call, the transaction that we did from my client. And she says, "Oh my God, I just wanted to call and thank you for the amazing cutting board that you sent from you and Shelly." And I thought, oh, yeah, sure. Shelly's fantastic, isn't she? I mean, because I didn't do that. Shelly did it. And she didn't do it for the accolade. She didn't do it for anything else other than to say, thank you and we care about you. And it's such a nice touch. But it led me back to that mindset that, just the small, simple thank yous and the small, simple hellos along the way throughout the year build the rest of your business through those other deals that you get and through the mindset that your seller or your buyer has about you and what you do for a living. So, I mean, that was enlightening. I love that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at building a team, I mean, she's put together a great team and she functions different than most teams you see in real estate. I mean, she follows her systems or checklists or processes, and things work. I've done, I think, 3 or 4 loans with her now. I didn't get a cutting board every time, but I did get a cutting board. And they're nice. But she is thoughtful. She always does something on the holidays. She always pops in and stuff. And that's not why I use her. I use her because of the great service and what she does, but she is a very thoughtful and giving person. And she gives a lot back to our agents. I mean, she did this listing challenge second time, and I think she's starting a book club with our agents on the full fee agent. But she's always given back. And, if you have an opportunity to use her for a loan or refer a client, I'd recommend it highly.
The cool thing too is I also, I got to see her client appreciation plan full circle, because not only does she send those gifts, the thank yous after a transaction's completed, but she layers it with, the air support, the emails that go out from her, or it's the weekly update, or it's the holiday thing, like you said, or it's their monthly newsletter that they put out to sharing information. And I understand that, I don't open and look at every single one of them and read them in depth and get ingrained in every one of them. But what I do notice is that I see her name in my inbox and it makes me think of her. And Usually it leads to a conversation that we have at some point later in that week. But I think that's the other point. A lot of agents get into these systems where they send out stuff and they're like, oh, it's a waste. My clients aren't seeing it. Well, that's not true. If I see your name come across in my inbox, I may not read everything that you sent, but I am seeing your name and I am thinking of you. And that's another piece. And then, she does an annual event for the clients that she works with and may not invite the agents to every one of them. But so she's out there creating business for me, even when I'm not doing it. And so that's a thing I look for in a strategic partner is that they're creating as much business for me as I am. And I think that you're right. If you get the chance to work with her, I can't say enough good things. She saved me more than once, and it's great to have a partner like that.
Yeah, and so that was 2 weeks ago, and last week, you had
Oh
the
goodness.
one and only Tom Blanchard.
Now I had heart palpitations leading up to this one. I was like, "What's he going to say? How's it going to go?" But you know what? I find out each time I talk with Tom. Tom's got a wealth of history. He's been in this business longer than I've been alive, and I'm going to keep saying that because it's funny every time. But he got the business in the '80s, early '80s, like the first '80, and he's been doing it at a pretty successful level while going through other careers. I mean, he was an EMT, which people forget. I think I shared with you. I watched Tom save someone's life in the airport in Reno. They actually needed his help, and so it was kind of an interesting occurrence to see it jump into the EMT mode and do that. By the way, that's the second EMT we've had on the show that cultivated a fantastic real estate career because of that training. And I think that what's interesting about him is that Tom showed that persistence will give you any amount of business you want. His ability to go on and send those faxes to the banks with updates of the market and just to make those connection points and build from there. We saw him build 100 deal a month. I think he had 100 transactions going in 1 month, listings and escrows and everything else from the persistence of that marketing. And then, the REO market tailed off. He still did a successful business. And then he's revamped it up again. And so you can't say it doesn't work when you keep relationships with people. It does. And I got so many things out of that meeting. And I'm surprised. Nuggets every time from Tom.
Tom's Nuggets. No, I when I first met Tom, he wasn't my favorite person. I've told him this, and I'm not shy to say it because
That's true with everybody.
I think a lot of people have had that first experience. I think early on in when I moved to Vegas, he's one of the first people I met down here, and his ego was a little bit different and stuff like that. And he went through state leadership, and he's had some. Things happen to kind of put him in his place and get him to think a little bit different, running for politics and different things like that. So he's just adapted over the years. And I'll just tell you, him being past president of the state and me getting to serve in that with him in that capacity of past president for 2 years, I got to travel with him. And I mean, Tom is a really great guy. And I hope he's not listening because his head will get big. But he's a really great guy, and it really has a big heart, and he tries to do the right thing for the association, for the members, for everybody. And so, yeah, I'm glad we got the time to get to know him a little bit better on last week's show. Because and if you don't know him, like he's worth going to lunch with because he's a lot of fun.
It's funny you say that because that was my same experience. I remember my mom, like literally, was cursing his name when she was state president. He was causing so many issues, and then he got on the board I think a year later, and I got to meet him, and I traveled with him, and he was on my executive team on local and on state, and he became one of my good friends. And it's the same idea that when I first met him, I thought, wow, this guy. And you can't meet a nicer, kinder, caring guy. I mean, he thinks about helping people. His agents absolutely love him, which surprises me every day. He goes above and beyond for them whenever he can, and he knows a lot of people. Like there isn't a lot of people in the state from the time he's been here politically. Prominent people around the valley, and I always thought it was because he pissed them off, but he really does. He has these great nurturing friendships from his time in his other career fields. And so it's just, he's a good guy. And it was a great meeting because it reminds me every time that there's an opportunity for those whales, the Gordon Gecko of real estate that are out there. And if I really got persistent and if I really went out of my comfort zone if I called that corporate CEO or I called that hedge fund manager and I stayed on them and I didn't give up, you could get those deals. And that's what I got from Tom's meeting that refreshed me that, the opportunities are there. I just have to look for them.
Well, I remember the day when you said that, you wanted to hire him over to our Southwest office as the broker, and I was like, "Okay, but, you're taking responsibility for this one."
Yeah.
And so I told a lot of people, they said, "Tom works for you?" I'm like, "Yeah, Chris hired him, I didn't."
Boy,
But,
what
I
a great
wished I
decision
would've
on me
now.
again.
Yeah, I wished I would have now because he is, I'd hitch my wagon to his any day. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was great. So those 2 were awesome. And so today, as we were talking and thinking about what to talk about, there's a couple directions we could go with this show. But let's start broker issues. I mean, we haven't done a broker panel in a while, and I think we need to get one of those scheduled on here. But we'll do kind of a mini broker panel between me and you because anytime the economy gets tougher, it seems like there's more and more issues. And I think it comes from a few different ways. Number one, nobody wants to take responsibility when something goes bad, right? A consumer or an agent. But number two, our agents or agents in the industry seem to chase more and try to
Yep.
create more deals and get more aggressive and maybe don't uh, pay attention to the details as much. So let's dive into some of these. I know you've got a list going, and I got one big doozy that I'd like to air out too. So why don't we start with the first one on your list?
Yeah, I think just real quick to add on to that, the reason why I love these individual interviews that we've been conducting, because you've done a couple pre the ones that I did, is because you always pull these interesting facts out of them and things that but you just don't remember that you needed to focus on, right? And out of all of them, I've gotten some of these things that affect my business right now in the marketplace as it's changing. And the recurring comment has been, this too will pass, right? And we're never going to be in the same market with the same scenario for long until something changes. And I think that, as real estate agents, we're spinning a lot of plates where it's the economy, it's the client issues that they're suffering with, it's our issues that we're suffering with, and just all of the factors in between. And so that's when these issues really pop up. And we see the same ones come over and over. And the first one on my list has to do with the fact that, a lot of the properties in our marketplace, because of the economy, because of the affordability, are rentals. They're tenant occupied, and you've got owners that have had these properties tenant occupied for a number of years. The properties have gone up in value and gone up in value and gone up in value. Now have these fantastic equity positions, and there's people out there with a lot of debt. And so the reason why owning a home helps build wealth is because it's a forced savings account that people put that money away. They can't just access it very easily. And so we're seeing a lot of situations right now where properties are being put on the market with a tenant in the property. And I just want to talk for a second about a few best practices when dealing with that. And also we have the issue of a seller wanting to rent a property until they close on it, or a buyer renting back to the seller after they close on it. So just going through a couple of those scenarios real quick. Number one is the question of, as the real estate agent, the listing agent, I get a property that is tenant occupied. What can I and what can't I do in regards to the tenant? Now, I'm asking you this question first because you're a property manager, you're a property management broker. You've got a lot of properties that you manage as you go through it. What are your initial thoughts that a listing agent should do when they find out that the property they're going to list is tenant occupied?
Run.
Right.
No. Uh, No, so, you treat it exactly like a regular sale in the way of you can market the property, you can negotiate the contract, you can do all that stuff. What you can't do is get involved with the tenant in the way of, maintenance repairs or property management stuff, collecting rents and stuff. And typically that's not so much included when you get into the sale of property. Your biggest issue is going to be now is the showing of the property
Yeah.
with the tenant in there. You're going to have to take other precautions. And if you've got a tenant that isn't very cooperative, you could have some issues there. Um, And so I think that those are your biggest issues. And then you've also got to make sure that you're looking at the fact to make sure the prorations are done at closing and on the settlement statement. The title company will do those prorations, but sometimes they miss that or they don't realize it's a rental. So you need to make sure that that's there and working out the transfer deposits and stuff. But mostly, hopefully, they've got a property management company already that's managing the property, and you would work closely with that property management company and your owner.
I everything you said is exactly the point of what agents I think miss sometimes. And one of the fears was, if I'm soliciting a seller to sell their home, and they're under management, I'm not intruding in anyone's agency when I'm looking at selling the property when they engage me. But when you start crossing that line, like you said, into the property management side, they have a relationship with a company, and you're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong in that effect because that property manager has a job in place of what they're doing. And so my comment has always been to the listing agent, first off, get the property manager and the tenant on your side as quick as possible because it'll lead to a better sale. The property manager is probably a little upset that they didn't get this listing. And so I would, bridge that gap initially by asking the owner, hey, what have you told the property manager? Do they know you're looking to sell the property? What have your conversations been? Has anyone said anything to the tenant? Because a lot of times, the owners just don't want to have to deal with any of that and skirt by it. And so that's when I think a listing agent gets themselves in a lot of trouble is they start making all these decisions that isn't theirs to make. And so like that would be my first hope is that you've engaged the owner of have you provided proper notice to these people? The other thing is you don't go out and post notices to tenants
Right.
as a listing agent. That is not your job. And if you're in a property where the property is not managed by a property manager and the owner's managing it, get a service. Get something like an eviction service, not that they're being evicted, but where they're going to post notices and do it a proper way that it's documented. I mean, that few $100 that owner's going to spend, I would even pay that out of my own pocket as a listing agent because the factors of what it could screw up in my deal are so tremendous that I want to make sure it's done that someone isn't skirting around it for a few $100. And I think that tenants will be honored to help you show the property if there's something in it for them. I've given a tenant, with the owner's permission, $100 off the rent, and they save that $100 for letting someone access the property. It's amazing how they change their personality and their conversations with me just over that. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is to have good communication, like you said, and find out a solution for the showings or the difficulty of the showings. And you're right, if it benefits the tenant, they're more likely to cooperate. And the other thing is it's not your job as the agent listing the property to interpret that lease agreement and that lease agreement saying that they've got to participate and that, the 24-hour notice, posting on their door to show the property. Stay out of that stuff. Utilize, like you said, either the property management company or the owner or a service company, and it'll keep you good. But, yeah, the more information you gather, the more communication you have, the smoother this transaction will go. Don't put yourself in a combative, situation with the property management company or the tenant, because that's just gonna create problems.
I think that too that a lot of listing agents want to do too much for the sake of servicing the client. And like if there's issues with the tenant and the owner and it's not managed by a professional property manager, I'm not going to interject. Even though I am a property manager, I'm not going to interject myself in the middle of collecting
Right.
things, processing things. That's on the owner because they chose to operate that way. And it's some tough love that keeps your self out of liability. And my owner knows these things are going to happen. They know these things will occur. And I think it's proper notice as you go through the transaction too. So if we're in a tenant occupied property and I'm going to sell it FHA or VA, we know that that buyer has to occupy the property. And so you as a listing agent are responsible under, good skill and care in most states that you're figuring out that timeline. That that, hey, listen, Mr. Owner, I understand I don't want to lose any rents for you, but we better give this tenant notice now because we're going to sell the property this way. There's a way to do that and to look at the paperwork and do that through the closing process so that it's compliant with those loan programs. I think that's another thing is you need to pull out a calendar. You need to look at the activities in the transaction, and you need to actually map that out so that you are setting the owner and the tenant and everyone else up for success. If I'm the tenant, my biggest concern is where am I going to go? You know,
Right.
where am I going to live next? And so I've actually been able to, when there isn't a property manager involved, meet with that tenant, turn them into a client, and say, "Hey, I'd love to put you into a rental. Let's get that process worked out for you. Let's get you over to this other home." And something big that you said is the proration of the rents and the lease. As a buyer's agent, if I'm helping a buyer buy a tenant occupied property, I want to see that stuff during my due diligence period. Like, I want to see
Yeah.
what the rent record is. I want to see what the repair history is that they've done if they'll share it with me. I want to know that the tenant's been paying their rent on time, and I can ask for those things as part of my due diligence period if I put it in the contract that way. And again, if I'm the buyer's agent and I'm dealing with this, I should be putting stipulations on what the listing agent's going to do as far as working with the seller to get the tenant out of the property in my contract. And like a well-written contract says what happens, when is it going to happen, who's going to pay for it, and what happens if it doesn't happen. I need to take the time to make those things work instead of just getting Twitter paid that I got a deal going. You know.
You said some key points in this. Number one, even if you're a property manager, if that property is managed under somebody else, don't get in the middle of it. Right. That's key. Number one. Number two was, as a buyer, as agent, as you're going through a process, you want to make sure that you're in the due diligence period, you're looking at the lease and all that type of stuff. And so a step before that, when you take that listing, you should be gathering that information so that you have it, so you have a clear picture of what you're able to sell here too. And then if it qualifies for an FHA buyer or VA buyer, because if the lease is too long, you're not selling it under those loan programs. So
Yeah.
good stuff. Homework, communication.
That's true, right? Hey,
Mhm.
so I got a question for you, and this was part of one of the ones that just came up, and it's a little bit on that same topic. But what's your opinion on occupancy agreements, the contract itself, just the way it's written, and someone having a short occupancy, whether it's held over a period of time, and then where's the inflection point when a lease is really needed? What is your kind of go to as a broker that you tell your agents?
So I'd say the same thing as the other one. Run. Don't if you don't have to do them, don't do them.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, the best way to do it is to be able to transfer escrow or transfer the property, possession of the property at closing. Right. Everything's done and it's a clean break. That's the best way. But that's not always the scenario, right? And so you do have these issues where the buyer needs to move in a little earlier, asked to move in earlier. Those are, to me, those are scary, because if
Yeah.
that loan and stuff doesn't come through, now you've got somebody living in the property, you've got all kinds of other issues, right? Then you got the other one where the seller, hey, they need to hold over, stay for a little bit of time. Those typically don't end well either because of the deposits, and it seems like there's always something um, that the new buyer wants to hold the seller to, and there's always seems to be an argument over that deposit at the end. So to me, if you don't have to do them, don't. But if you do, then use the forms that are provided by our association to do them. They're written the best for you. The timeline, if it's over 30 days, it probably should be a lease,
Yes.
right? Under that, then you can utilize this. If it's just a few days, I don't even think you need that. You just need to put the possession for a certain date, because all the contract terms apply. But if it's past a couple days, then yeah, you probably need to use these addendums.
I like that you said that, because I believe the same thing. Like, it's a time based situation. I think that one of the things I've noticed that is, if you're writing the purchase agreement or you're countering the purchase agreement and these things are going to happen, then if it's a very short period of time, I agree with you. The occupancy agreements may not be best for a day or two, but I think you need to put wording into the RPA that makes concise sense on what happens. What if these things do hold over, all the parties are tied to an action, and what they're going to do. I mean, because the contracts do have very specific terms that are listed there. And I think that if there's going to be a holdover that's unintended, then there's a ramification that has to be, the parties agree to enter into some agreement if for any reason it goes past the state. I mean, the what ifs are what they're paying you for to understand that it could happen. But like you said, the occupancy agreements that most boards provide, they're kind of put in place so that if the AC breaks in July when you're moving into that property, that's a big problem. Like, doesn't mean the home warranty is just going to come in and fix it. And so we've seen that happen many, many, many times. And so that's why those agreements are put in place, because they say what happens if the house has a major issue. And then, as you made the lease the greatest point, over 30 days, you have a tenancy situation anyway. And so the lease is the best use document to handle that, because now there's state laws that have to be abided by that you've now put yourself into, which sucks. I agree with you. If you can run away from it, run away from it.
Yeah, but I think you see a lot more of that. You might probably will see a lot more of that now as the market slows a little bit, where you have the time to do that. When there's multiple offers, I think a lot of times those kinds of offers don't necessarily get accepted as easy. But sometimes during the transaction, things pop up too, and you need extensions. So
So after doing a deal like that, I need a vacation. And so I got this question the other day, and it led me to a chain of thought that I don't think many agents process because of technology today. And it said, what should happen with my business when I go out of town? And I want to make a clear statement. If I go out of town for a day because I'm going to fly up to Reno to hang out, I probably have access to my computer. I probably have access to my email. My phone has everything on it. I can call and talk to people. That's one thing. But if I go to Europe for 2 weeks, or Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and I'm out of the market area and I've got clients that are buying and selling, what should I do with my business? And I think this one this one is number one. Congratulations, all your listings will now sell, because we've seen that happen. Any deals that are pending or sitting out there that won't happen when I go out of town. What do you suggest an agent do?
well, I mean, even if you're going to Reno for the day, I think you need to let your broker know, right? Because it's surprising how many calls we get when somebody can't get hold of one of the agents.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to just know, they're on an airplane,
Yep.
because then it saves us a lot of time of having to track them down as well. So I think communication with the office is important. Even if you don't let the broker know, let the office manager know. Communicate that, right? Now, if you're going out of town, you should have an agent that you're working with that can handle your business and take care of everything while you're gone. And
Yeah.
you may not need them, right? You may be able to work on your vacation, but I think you're crazy to even plan a vacation and plan on working on it. Like, if you're going to take a vacation, take a vacation. Put the people in place that you can not worry about your business while you're gone and go enjoy yourself. But have somebody here that you're working with, because things happen. You go somewhere, you think you're going to have internet, now all of a sudden you don't, and now you're out of commission. So have somebody on the thing, and then prepare for it. Like, change your voicemail, right? Have an autoresponder set on your email, like the basic things to communicate with your clients. I early on in my career, I took a vacation. It was a long time ago since I've had a vacation. Tyson was like 2. So no, I'm just kidding. I take vacations because I think you need them. But um, I went to Hawaii, and I was working with this couple, and we put in an offer on a fourplex, right? Um, we hadn't actually got it accepted. I left town. I told them I was leaving town. That's the other thing. Communicate to your clients. I didn't have an agent that was assigned to my business, but I let them know I wasn't going to be there. Well, they got anxious. They went out and found a fourplex, and another agent sold them the property. And I had a buyer agency agreement, right? And when it came down to it, it didn't matter that I told them, because when we're sitting there talking about enforcing the agency agreement or not, and they're sitting in front of my broker, they were saying we didn't know,
Mhm.
right? And whether they knew or not, they were saying they didn't know. And so where I went wrong is I didn't have an agent that they could call on or that was following up with them to keep them in the process. I just expected them to sit there and wait for a week for me to come back. And that's not fair. And so you've got a business, you've set it up, you've worked hard to get clients. Make sure that the service is there and the people are there to take care of them.
I love that you said it that way, because like so many people are worried about a commission check that they probably are going to lose more than they're going to gain. I'd rather get a piece of every check than not any of one that doesn't close. And so when I first got started in the business, I was the vacation agent. So if you were going on vacation, call Chris to take over your business, and I had a whole process in place. I would charge if I had a fee structure based on what I would actually do with your client while you're gone. And so basically, you would call me up and say, Chris, we're going out of town. We're going to be gone a week. Here are the deals I have. Here are the pending buyers I have. Here are the pending listings I have. And then if I interacted with any of those clients, I had to sign a duties owed, because now I'm getting personal information about them in the file and negotiating on their behalf. But I had a form that was filled out for every one of those clients. And I documented with the agent what the deal was. If I went out and showed them a house and all I did was show property, I got X percentage. It was like 10% or something like that. If they ended up writing an offer on it down the road, if I had to write the offer, I got 25% of the deal, right? So I would go and show them property all weekend and write that offer while the agent was out of town. By the way, how cool would it be to be out of town and you've already got someone who showed the property, got it accepted, and now it's in contract when you get home? That's like Christmas, right? And
Yeah.
so, and then if I had to manage the entire escrow, like I had to do it all the way from beginning to end because now they were working with me, I was on a 50-50 with the agent. And I can't tell you how many transactions I did. It was over 10 with agents who went and enjoyed their vacation. And I updated them like crazy. I sent them texts, I sent them emails, I told them what was going on because that's what they needed to know so that they could work their business. And I started getting calls from people that weren't with my company. Hey, Chris, I hear you're the guy to talk to when you go out of town. And it was a great business structure for me because when I was newer, I just needed transactions. I needed people to be out working with and things to happen. And I always returned the client back to the agent. I never once poached anyone's client. I made sure that was in my agreement that that's their person so that they feel comfortable with it. And it was another way to grow your business in a niche of people going out of town and you being the person that handles it. But I think people forget about the paperwork. You do have paperwork requirements if you're interjecting into someone's deal that you need to be participating in. But it worked well for me for that reason. I wish you would have known me then. I could have helped you.
Yeah, you could have helped me up in Salt Lake. That would have been great, and I wouldn't have lost a client. Hey, you said something in there though that was important, right? And that's to agree on the fees for every scenario before something happens, right? You don't want at the end to be trying to figure it out and then fighting over that's too much or that's not fair, that kind of stuff. And so I've dealt with this for a lot of years as a broker, so much so that it's in our policies and procedures manual. And it breaks down exactly how we're going to cut the commission if you don't have an agreement.
Yep.
And you may not like it. So you might want to review it. You might want to take and negotiate out your fees. But it was the only way as a broker we could make the decision that was fair because otherwise somebody's gonna be unhappy. So if it's in writing, then it's done. And you guys have all agreed to that when you signed your independent contractors agreement. And so it's there unless you guys agree to something different. So that's important. Um, and yeah, you know, you don't and you can find somebody that you just work with and you don't charge each other anything because you both travel enough. You know what I mean?
I'm not
Um,
finding that person.
yeah, but the other thing was, when you said the supple or the duties owed, they're gonna have to have their name on the duties owed. And if I was going on vacation, and now that I know Chris is my go-to, vacation guy, I would go have a conversation with each one of my clients, letting them know that I'm gonna be out of town. Chris is going to be taking care of any of the needs during this period of time, and I need to add you to the duties owed. And
Yeah.
so I would go through that process to make sure that I'm having the conversation with them and I'm getting the paperwork so that I make it as easy as possible for my client and also the agent covering my business while I'm gone.
I would actually take the same step and make a phone call as that other person. So the agents had an email that they would send out to all the people, or they would call. A couple of them we would meet in person before they would leave town. And even if they didn't use me, even if we never interacted in the whole thing, I would always make a phone call and leave a voicemail or talk to them and say, "Hey, I'm Chris. I'm here at the office. This is my phone number. If anything happens, you find a property, something goes on. I just want you to know I'm here ready for you for the same purpose that you pointed out." And one of the other things is I learned a long time ago the fastest way to lose a friend is to not have everything in writing,
Yeah.
because down the road when there's money on the line and they may need it more than you do, and there's nothing in writing, that's where friendships end. And so I've taken the step that before anything happens, like if I get a lead and I'm passing it to a team member, or I get a lead and I'm giving it to my parents, I put a text in the app, our signature app, or a text chain on my phone, and I say, "Hey, thank you so much for helping me with this. I really appreciate your time. Just want to be clear that you're going to get X percentage and I'm going to get Y percentage. And if it goes through this way, this is what's going to happen. Please confirm that I have this correct, that you're on the same page I am." 4 times this last year, I've used those texts to remind somebody what the deal was, because if I hadn't have had it, we would have had a little bit of a dispute. Not that it would have been bad or indifferent, but I'm just glad I had it versus not. So don't be that person. Have it
You know
right.
what's funny is this all seems like common sense, right? And you say, well, we're spending a lot of time on this. But the reason we're spending a lot of time on this is because the common sense isn't being followed all the time. I mean, this has been an issue recently, and that's why it's coming up. So it's just good to think through things as you go through and have a checklist of what needs to happen before you go on vacation. And if you need help with it, like finding an agent to work with or whatever, reach out to the broker or the office manager, and we'll pair you up with somebody and make sure that everything's taken care of. So
By the way, that's good advice if you're doing a commercial referral, if you're doing an out of state referral, if you're doing a property management referral. I don't care what it is, but this is a business, right? You're running a
mhm,
business for the idea of creating income and profit for yourself. So why would you have business going on with no agreement? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So talking about agreements, it leads us to the next question that's on there, and that's the buyer broker agreement.
mhm,
Since the real estate settlement has come down, we've had a number of occurrences that have happened, and the first question I got just this last week is a pretty common one. What do I do if my BBA expires? I put one together. I went out and showed them property. A month's gone by, and now it expired. What do I do?
what do you do when your listing expires?
I get a new one, or
That's right.
I do a. There isn't really a change order for the BBA, but like the way the BBA is written is I could just do a new one with a new time frame because the other one's now expired. I mean, ours is one page. I think the one from the Las Vegas Association is 4 or 5 pages. I don't know how big the one in Salt Lake is. It what 3 or 4 pages probably at the
Yeah.
most. But they're written so that you could do a new one, just like if you met the client a year later and they still haven't bought anything.
Yeah, and so you could do an addendum to it, or you could do a new one. But you do need to extend that date. You did ask though, what do you do if you're in escrow and
Yeah.
your buyer broker agreement expires?
Well, the nice thing is the way that the contracts are written, it says until I purchase a property. And now I'm under contract on that property I'm purchasing. So the contract takes precedence over that process. And so it's always kind of been the rule of thumb ever since I've been in the business that I'm good. And as soon as I go under escrow, but what happens if I fall out of escrow? Well, that problem now is I have a buyer who's not contracted with me. And so I've
Yeah,
also made the recommendation that yes, you're protected, just like if I have a listing contract and we go under contract, I'm still protected under the listing agreement because we're in escrow on it. But what does it hurt? What does it hurt to just shore that up and make sure it's there? You can tell the client, hey, listen, we're already good under this, but I just want to have all my I's dotted, my T's crossed, and just, this email shall serve as notice that we're still under agreement with it, whatever you want to do. But the whole thing is once you're under contract, you're usually protected pretty much under everything. Am I wrong in
yeah.
Utah? Like that's how it is in Nevada.
No, no, it's the same. It's pay attention to detail. You pay attention to your dates when they expire and stuff. But yeah, like if you have a listing and it's in escrow and you put it in a contingent status on the multiple listing service and it expires in the system, it stays in contingent status.
Yeah.
And then once you close on escrow and you change it to sold, it goes into sold status. Now, if you were to put it back in active status, then it would go into expired status because your dates are off, right? And that's the same as the buyer broker agreement or the buyer agency agreement. So it's important to pay attention to your dates. And like you said, what does it hurt to extend it?
Yeah.
To just it's peace of mind, and then you don't have to worry about it if something goes wrong with that transaction.
I think the other thing too is the question came up several times of, I have a buyer broker agreement. I've cited at X percentage, and we're in the negotiation factor. The seller in the concession section has agreed to pay a Y. My buyer says, well, I can pay you a part of it, but I can't pay you all of it. And you decide to make the business decision to accept whatever that amount is. Well, what do I do? Do I need a change order or something to the agreement? The answer is no. Escrow provides here in Nevada, they provide a commission instruction. That commission instruction, because the BBA is between the broker and the client, provides signature from the broker and the client, say that this will be the way the commission breakdown will happen. I've seen the issue of a few lenders, which I don't understand why they're involved in the middle of it, but a few lenders come back and say, well, we want something from your broker. We want a different agreement. Well, the commission order's in the closing documents. It's there. It's a written agreement because it's signed by everybody. That's why escrow has it. And so I think a lot of times I've had to actually get on the phone with two lenders this month and say, do you see this document at closing? And they're like, yeah. And I said, do you see the commissions on it? Yeah. And it shows all the breakdown. Yeah. What else do you need? Well, I guess I don't. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to reassure and remind somebody what's provided.
Well, and you need to reassure, and the lender needs to understand we're not taking money outside of escrow.
Yeah.
That's not how we operate. So there's no other side agreement. You're not getting anything outside of that. If you're collecting a fee, it's all done at escrow and it's done that way. And so, yeah, theoretically, you could adjust your buyer agreement down, right? You
Oh,
can't
no.
adjust it up in fee. The other one that's coming up a lot is the builders.
Yes.
So like you have an agreement at X, and the buyer or the builder's only offering Y, which is a little bit less. They're wanting you to adjust your agency agreement and provide it over, and that's not necessary.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think they have a right to have you get in between our agreements and what we have with our client.
I
Um,
think that I think your point though on the sanctity of the settlement agreement is the fact that I charge X and I told the client that's what it is. By the builder or the lender telling me to go back and augment these things, that's causing a problem in the sheer idea of what the settlement was all about. Is
right.
that I'll just willy-nilly change fee structures, whatever someone tells me. I think that's a great point that you point out is that they're hurting that idea by saying those things. But let's say that they said, hey, I want something in writing for the broker. Have you done an email lately? Like if the agent sent an email saying, listen, my broker's copied on this. We are willing to accept this. The client knows we're willing to accept this. My broker's confirming we're accepting this. It'll be on the change order. Would you participate in that?
I'd participate, and I still don't understand why the builder should get involved with what you're getting paid from your client, whether you're charging them or not. But nonetheless, yeah, I'd participate in that. I'd do a letter or anything else like that saying on this property, because that's where you run in the other problem. You go and you alter that agreement down, and then that deal falls out, and now you go try to sell them something else. Guess what? You've already altered that agreement down, so now you're working for less on the next one.
Yeah,
And I just
that's a great point.
I just don't think you should get in the habit of doing that. Besides the fact, I don't think you should be altering. You should be charging less than you agreed to in the first place. But that's a different discussion.
Yeah. I made the decision in my business that I've actually increased my cost structure of what I charge because of the fact that there are going to be scenarios that I can't control. And there are going to be issues where I am going to have to participate with a client unwillingly, where I'm going to have to support them in it. And at that structure, no matter what happens, I feel very good about every transaction I'm going to do that I will get paid what I'm worth. And I made that decision based on conversations we were having and things that we were seeing. And so far, I haven't had a client upset or pissed off or complaining about it because I sold the value of what it is I provide. And there's been a few instances since then where I was able to help out on something small, like, that one thing that would have created such a huge cloud of anger for everybody that I said, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And it's not like I give out $100 bills or anything like that, but like that made everyone feel better. And because I have the cost basis I do, I was able to do it. And I think that that's the thing you should be thinking of is this business make sense the way you're operating it, the way you charge it? But
You know, the other thing is like when you sit down and get these agreements done, like put in the fee that you work for, right? Because it doesn't matter if you go sell something else, you go sell something and they're offering more, you're not getting it.
yeah,
And we've actually had to return commissions
yeah,
uh, where we've got a buyer broker agreement at X, and Y comes in. And so there's more money than what we've agreed to take, and we've had to send it back because we're not going to pay the agents based on something that's different. It's a violation of the settlement. And so make sure that what you're comfortable working for, whatever you put in that agreement, that's what you get.
yeah,
And so if it's not what you can get, it's what you get. So it's important to make sure that you're really setting standards and understand what your costs are to run your business, and you're charging fees that work for that. And like I said, it sucks to tell an agent that you're not getting all that money. We got to send it back.
yep. I have one left, but you said you had a pretty big one. So let's go to that first, and then I'll pull up mine at the end. Save the best for last.
All right. So every issue it seems like I'm dealing with in my life. Well, I shouldn't say that because I've got a lot of personal issues, but no, it's every issue that I'm dealing with really has comes down to property management.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes it's with an agent that doesn't have a permit, and they are doing the so-called courtesy listing.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's actually with the property manager that's doing that so-called courtesy listing. First of all, if you're doing anything for free, stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care how much business that client's given you. I don't care how much they promise you. I don't care any excuse you come up with. Do not list a property for rent for free. Because what happens is, and I'll say that again, do not list a property for rent for anybody for free. Because what happens in the end is when things go bad, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more money. And I'm seeing it time and time again. So the issue I'm dealing with right here is we have a scenario where an agent sells a property, a nice property, right? Um, multi-million dollar property, and it's going to become a rental. And so gets a great commission on that property. So what the heck? I'll put it up there and I'll help him rent it. And I won't charge him because I just made this great commission.
Yeah.
Then you go down the process of you get the tenant in there, right? You do a lease agreement. Great, not a problem. But your lease agreement, this is the other thing, make sure you're using the proper one if you're not going to manage the agreement, because there are two agreements in Nevada. There's one
Yep.
in Utah, but we deal with this less in Utah because property management's a little different up there. But there are two, right? I think it's AB 161 that passed years ago, requires certain terminology at certain font sizes and a notarized document if it's going to be owner managed. And so I see time and time again the wrong lease being used, right? And then the tenant gets in there. It's fine. The tenant pays rent for a few months. That's great. There's some issues with the property. You get involved in the maintenance side of it. You're not managing the property, but you help coordinate something with the contractor or something like that. That's not good because you're not managing the property. You're not being compensated for the property. And then there's an eviction. Well, you didn't manage the property, but you contacted the eviction company for the owner and you lined it up. And now you've got this issue where um, the eviction company would be evicting the people, but your name's somewhere in there, but you're not
Yeah.
managing the property. And then it goes out, and then maybe the owner sues the tenant for um, lost rents and stuff like that, not honoring the lease, and wins, right? Well, what does that do? It might make the tenant a little upset. So now the tenant decides they're going to countersue. And so now they sue the owner. And guess who else they sue?
The agent.
You.
Yeah.
You as an agent, right? And sometimes they even bring signature into it, even though we're not on the contract. We didn't do anything, but you work here, so you bring that in. So um, we go down that path, and now you're in a process where you look at it and you go, okay, now what do you do when you get sued? You let your broker know, right? And then the next step is what? Probably to look at E&O. Well, you go down the E&O path, and maybe E&O doesn't cover it.
Because you didn't make any money.
You didn't make any money on it. You weren't the property manager on it. You didn't run it through the company. Like, okay, now you're a pretty big predicament right there, right? And
Yeah.
so you think, well, the owner's going to be right on my side because he's going to tell him that I didn't manage the property. I didn't manage the property. But guess what? The owner happens not to have the right insurance. He has owner occupied insurance when it's a rental. And so now the insurance company is going to do what?
They're going to not claim. They're going
They're going to
to.
deny his claim. So guess where he's going?
It's the agent's fault. Sure.
Yeah, he's going after the agent, the real estate company, whatever it can, because he can't accept responsibility. He's going to blame somebody else, right? And so why I tell you this, and this is a hypothetical story, just so you know, I made it up with
Scared the hell
some
out of me.
lines, but with along some lines of some of the stuff that has happened. I combined two issues into one, two different transactions into one. But really, what it comes down to is your good intention to do something good for this person to help them because they've given you so much business over the time comes back to burn you. And
Yeah.
what happens if you end up at the division for something and something like that, and they find violations, you lose your license over this, all
You lost
because you
your whole
wanted to do a
idea.
courtesy listing.
Yep.
Like, I just don't get it, right? And this goes even when you list your own property that you own on the MLS for rent, like, you better be talking to a broker.
Yep.
Um, and so, yeah, that's my diatribe. So, uh,
So I love that you brought this up because just this last week, I literally went through this scenario, not like you said, but in a different way. I have a client who I sold a piece of land to the beginning of the year, and then I sold her a house last week. And the house that they were moving out of, they said they wanted to rent. Well, I'm a property manager, right? But they decided, you know what, they know the people really well. They're going to rent to the whole thing, and so they called me up and said, "Hey, Chris, can you write the lease for us?" And I said, "Well, I can, but I don't know that you're going to want to pay for that because I charge about $1,500 to write that lease, go through the process, and do that whole thing as a licensed property manager." And I said, "And I don't know, you're only going to get X number of rent, and unless you want me to do management, I don't really know it's the right thing for you. I might suggest that you use an attorney or go get your own forms and do it yourself because my liability factor is so high." And so the client took a little bit of time to think about it, and they said, "Well, what would you charge for management?" And I said, "Well, I have this fee structure," and I presented my fee structure for it. And she goes, "Well, why would I use that?" And I said, "Well, the whole point is at midnight when the water heater blows up, they're going to call me, not you. And I'm going to facilitate all of the operations of the property. Basically, you're taking this home and turning it over to me, and you don't have to worry about it. You just have to cash the checks." And I said, "And when we have a question, we'll ask and you answer. But we handle all the phonetics." And I said, "So if sake of mine is important to you, that's why you'd hire a property manager." And so she says, "Oh, okay. Well, would you work with us on the fee structure?" And I said, "Well, not really. I mean, how many ways can we split $100?" I said, "But this is what I do. This is the service I provide." I said, "But I'm not telling you you need to do it. I'm not angry. I'm not upset. Do what's best for you and your family." And I left it at that. I didn't, throw up all over. This is someone who's just closed two good transactions with me. And she called me back a couple hours later and said, "You're hired." And I said, "Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to providing that service, the whole thing." It Agents get so Twitter pated about giving something up for free that the client didn't know you actually gave something for free until you explain what it costs to have it. And
yeah.
so I explained to her what it costs. I explained what I'm going to do for the value. And if I were to discount something or if it were to get something, she would know I did it. Right. And I think that's the whole perspective. I had another lady, this is even funnier. She called me up and she says, "I'm interviewing three property managers. You're one of them. And you came highly recommended from a friend." And I said, "Well, thank God. That's great. Thank you." So we went back and forth. And she says, "Well, I'm talking to this other person. They're going to do it for this really cheap amount." And I said, "Then you should sign with them." I said, "You can't put that type of price tag on the level of communication my team and I provide." And I said, "And I wish you the best. If it ever changes, let me know." She called me back an hour later and said, "You're hired." And so don't just think because it's free or cheap, that's the route they want to go. People want value. And I think that what you're saying is that no matter what it is, make sure that the value makes sense. Because if I got sued in those transactions, I'm going to pay, a huge chunk of money to an attorney who's the only one that's going to smile during the whole deal. And
Yeah.
so value makes a difference. I really believe that.
It's we do the accountability calls now here at Signature every Tuesday and Thursday, and we focus a lot of time on um, not chasing business, not just doing business because of to do the numbers. A lot of agents just it's about production numbers, right? And for me, it's not about more, it's about better business
Yeah.
and getting paid what you're worth. And if somebody is looking just for the least expensive or the cheapest service, they're probably not the best client for you, right?
Yeah.
That's where you're going to run into problems. If you've got somebody that's willing to pay what you're worth, and for the services that you do, then you're going to provide a better service. You're not going to cut corners and they're going to appreciate it more and they're going to refer you business. And so I think a lot of times we do these favors for people with the courtesy listing and it's funny because even when they charge, they call it a courtesy listing. It's just crazy. But we do these things because we don't want to lose business, right? And the problem is you're not going, or the issue there is you're not going to lose business if they're your clients and they're going to work with you. They're going to work with you. If they're not, and they're only using you because of the fee, they were never your client anyway.
What do they say? The path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
Uh, every one of those transactions I've ever been down that road is hell. and I end up losing more than just the client. It's never what you think it is.
Yeah.
I had one
One
issue.
last thing though, before on that issue, before we jump on your
Yeah.
last one, I know we're getting close on time. There's this saying, "Stay in your lane."
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And if you don't do management and you don't do rental listings and stuff like that, then don't try to get involved in it. Like, it's okay. Like, you sell a house to somebody and they want to rent it now and they want to self manage it. It's okay to refer them to one of our property managers in the office.
Yeah.
They can have a discussion on what property management looks like and what tenant placement looks like. And you can make a referral fee off it. You know what I mean? And so, um, stay in your lane. Do what you're good at, marketing, selling properties, or if you work commercial, working commercial. And if you do property management, do property management. But you don't have to be a jack of all trades. And I think if you stay in your lane, so to speak, you're going to get in less trouble because you're going to understand your expertise and go down that path, and you'll get paid for it.
I think the other thing that's alluring to people is I'm going to make this monthly income and it's all going to be great. I'm going to get it. There's not a whole lot I have to do. And that's a lie. I've been 14 years as a broker and a property manager, and I have an entire support team that I paid for through the company. I only make a small percentage of those dollars because it's worth it to have help and security, knowing that things are getting taken care of, clients are getting worked, that those things are happening. When we used to try to gobble up every dollar. That's not how that works. And
Yeah.
so, if you're thinking about that, make sure you talk to a few seasoned property managers to find out the truth behind it. The last thing that I had come up is one that is showing us that the market is changing, and it's this anxious seller phobia that's out there right now because properties aren't all selling in 30 days. I mean, we saw that for a while there, 70% of properties were selling in under 30 days, and then I went to 60%, and now we're at like 54% of properties are selling in 30 days. So that means 46% of the marketplace is not. And if you're used to that happening, there are many agents that have never experienced anything else than this. They're freaked out. And you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago talking about days on market and why we track it, and the average in an area and the absorption rate of properties that are out there. And so we're back to a time when we see listing periods probably going into the 60, 90-day cycle. Number one, I'm ecstatic about that, not because I want to wait that long to my next check, but because that gives me an entire marketing period to generate buyers and sellers off of these listings and to generate some great quality leads. But that means I need to prep my seller for what's going to happen. The other thing that we notice, and you've seen this along a lot as a broker, is that when clients aren't told what to expect, they start to think the agent isn't working. And that's when we see listing requests for withdrawals. We see listings start to expire. You can't take a 3-month listing in a 90-day marketing period, right? What are you seeing as a broker? Because I know I get this all the time. What should I do, Chris? My listing hasn't sold. What's your usual answer?
Reduce the price.
Yeah.
No, seriously, a lot of times the home is sitting on the market because it wasn't priced properly.
Yeah.
Right. And there could be a number of reasons why that happens. Number one, you could be in a declining market and you're pricing it off sales that happened 3 or 4 months ago.
Yep.
And that's not where the market is today. So you've got to watch that. You got to pay attention to showings. You've got to, if you're not getting showings, you probably are going to have to do a price adjustment. And if they're and then pay attention to what's happening in the area out there, your zip code, stuff like that. Are homes in that price range selling and you're not getting showings? You're probably out of whack. So um, a lot of it is a pricing discussion. I think changing markets or tough markets are opportunities. The good opportunity, like you just said, is now you have a longer period of time to market a property and you have a better opportunity of duplicating that business, right? For sale signs, ads, open houses, everything that you're going to do to market that property. But what comes along with that is a lot of sellers' dissatisfaction because they get frustrated because their
Because they
home
think
isn't
you're not doing
selling,
anything. Yeah.
right? And the reason they get frustrated is because of lack of communication from the agent.
Yeah.
If we communicate more with the sellers on a weekly basis or um, more if you can, but at least once a week, giving them an update, even if nothing's happening, tell them what you're doing because sellers are okay when nothing's happening if they know something's being done,
Yeah.
right? We're trying to get it done. You're doing something each week to try to get this property sold. That makes a big difference. So the communication is going to be a big key to keep your seller satisfied. I The other thing it does is when you work with buyers, it gives you more of a selection, and that's good and bad because now you've got buyers that have a lot of selection, and they may have a hard time making a decision. But it also helps you sharpen your skills, not only with working with buyers and understanding exactly what they're looking for, so you're showing them what they're there and you're putting them through the process, but also the communication skills you have with the seller. These kinds of markets make better agents. And you're right. A lot of agents haven't been through it.
When I first got started, I was told the three things that affect sellability of a home, and it's location, condition, and price, right? And there was a time frame when you used to be able to pick a house up and move it to a better location. Those times are gone. We don't do that anymore. We
Yeah.
used to fix houses up all the time, and people do that, and sometimes that makes sense. But price is the easiest, most effective way to sell a home. And I think there's a fourth one now that kind of has hit, and that's buyer saturation. When you provided Real Scout to all the agents of Signature, it really showed me that if I'm paying attention to the analytics of where buyers are looking and what price point in the area I'm listed in, I can actually augment and get more of those buyers to look at my listing. And so, thank you. That was a great tool for making that happen. But probably 15 years ago, I instituted a weekly update to every client on whatever's happening, and it's a very simple email. There's online views every single week, regardless of what's done with the property. Why aren't you telling your clients about it? No showings is the amount of showings, right? If nothing happened and you know it, tell them. Nothing says you can't pick up the phone and call the other three listing agents in your subdivision and say, how many showings did you get this week? Have you gotten any movement? And if the answer is all no for everybody, well, you didn't do anything wrong. No one got any. But
Yeah.
that's the info you could get if you would put your ego out of the way and actually, get out there and check. But I try to do that every single Friday. It seems like a good way to start the weekend with a price reduction, right? And I always recommend the next step to a client, reduce the price, even if you're listed at 500,000 and you drop the price $2,500, it's movement, right? It sends that message out to everyone that at least you're motivated. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, and then I'll just tell you the actual secret, um, and I've actually done this, and it actually worked, multiple times, I believe they sell them at the board store. There's these little Saint Joseph statues, and there's a little
Right
prayer
there.
you say, and you bury it in the front yard, and we always buried him upside down facing the street. But what was funny is, I would actually go in for a price reduction for my seller with that statue, and said,
Yeah.
"We've tried everything. This has worked. Pull this out," and I talk about the story behind it, and then I just say, "What we do is we do a price reduction, and we put this and we bury the statue, and we go out there together and we bury the statue, and it usually sells, and it wasn't necessarily sold because of the statue. It was sold because we did the price reduction, but it makes it fun. So,
Yeah.
but you can get those they're in a little green box.
Still do. Yeah. Still do.
Yeah. So
Well, all good stuff. Thank you for sharing some of these broker topics. I hope that it was helpful for everybody out there. Funny enough, all of this has happened because we've been through this before. All of these things we've seen before, and sometimes multiple times we've seen them, and they too will pass, but the lessons you learn from them will help you for the rest of your career. So,
yeah. That's true. So, again, always great spending an hour with you, Chris. Hopefully, everyone else got as much out of it as we did because we entertain ourselves. So, appreciate it. Anyway, look forward to future episodes. I know we got some good ones coming up and planned. So, hopefully, everyone's getting a lot out of these. Make sure you're like and subscribe to us on all the podcast channels and even YouTube. And remember, we're always affirming your success.